Rules for black men in this world. I think it's so important. Every once in a while, we kind of do a great reset. And those of us who have a little bit of life experience just turned 40 years young. However, I do have some experience on this planet and in this life that I think could be helpful to pass down to the youth. The first rule for young black men, and this really can apply to women, older black men as well. There's been a lot of media stories of young black men ending up missing, hanging with groups of people who are not taking accountability for the safety of the entire group, and just a series of lynchings and atrocities against the younger black and older black male community. It just seems like it's never going to end. So I wanted to come up with some rules to live by. The first rule as a younger black man is to love yourself. Know a lot of you guys don't understand even what the concept of love even is. Start there. You need to spend time understanding what love is. It's a multitude of different things: self value, self confidence, knowing your self worth, really having compassion on yourself, giving yourself some grace, understanding when you fall short of certain expectations, being patient with yourself, kind to yourself, understanding your limitations, really having self awareness. When you love yourself, you're aware of your limits, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. When you're aware of yourself, you know your potential. So there's no love without self awareness. Have some awareness of yourself, what you bring to this world, and the value you have not only to yourself, but to your family, to your friends. The first rule I would say for young black men is understand the concept of self love, what that means, not only relative to yourself, but also to your family. All the other rules are anchored off of the rule of self love for black men. You have to love yourself first in order to even comprehend the amount of worth and value that you bring to this world. And that others see many of the difficulties and challenges that black men face are a direct consequence for them not having a brevity of understanding of what self-love even is. Their self-worth is low. They don't value themselves. They don't value their community. They don't value their culture. They don't value their history or the contributions of others who look like them, which by consequence puts them in situations and environments that put their life at risk because of this. So the first rule is to learn how to love yourself, learn what love is, what love means, and also what love isn't. A lot of times you get the definition of things by looking at the opposite. So sometimes you might say, I don't know what the hell love means. Everything around me is hate, hate, hate. Well, let that be an example of what love isn't. Second, I would say, and this is going off the cuff, so I didn't write any of this stuff down. The second rule is you have to identify your value system. You have to figure out what is truly important to you. Is it important to me that I fit in and I start people pleasing? Is it important to me that I have a career? Is it important to me that I prioritize my family? Is it important to me that I develop a skill? Skateboarding, rollerblading, whatever. You need to understand what's important to you. These are called your values. When you know what's important to you, it makes you less of a slave to what's important to everybody else. Even if you grow up in a family where maybe it's important to for dad to be the rule of the house with the iron fist. Maybe it's important for dad where everybody has to submit to his authority. Or maybe it's important for dad that everybody feels loved and he's the spiritual leader of the home. Maybe it's important for mom, the family comes together, we eat at the dinner table, we go to church on Sundays, or we don't. When you have a understanding of what your value system is, you have more appreciation for the values of others, and you also know how to separate and set boundaries appropriately with things that just don't resonate with you. You have a language for it rather than reactivity and rebellion. You're able to kind of communicate and articulate. This isn't really that important to me. This is my priority right now. This is my non negotiable. Understand your value system and your core values. And it also protects you from crowds and environments of people who really don't serve you or really don't align with your core values. So have a firm understanding of what's important to you. I would say is number two. And even revisiting number one when it comes to loving yourself, I would even add to that or tag to that, really, exploring spirituality as a young Black man. I don't know really how popular spirituality is with the young community because I'm not out there doing a survey. But a part of loving yourself, I would say, for that first rule is also understanding spirituality and the benefits and reward you can get from also loving yourself. So, love yourself, number one. Two, understand your core values, what's important to you. I would say for number three, you need to learn your history. You need to understand the history of your community, of your culture, African American culture. This helps you have a little bit of awareness and context to your current environment. The reason why they don't want a lot of the sort of extreme parts of history and the raw truths of history exposed is because it really makes what's going on right now between Black and white people make sense. And it also gives you an understanding into different groups' psychology and certain factors and elements that are still standing. So love yourself, understand your core values, know your history. A lot of younger Black people don't really know their history, so they don't understand the stage that they're placed on. So they end up putting themselves in really precarious situations because of that lack of knowledge and insight into their history. You need to understand law. You need to understand the history of law in the Black community. You know, really understand the legal infrastructure as much as you can. I'm not saying you got to be a lawyer, but you need to understand that this country is ran off of law. Your peers, people who you run into and who you encounter in this world, this is your jury because 9 times out of 10, people around you are going to be selected for jury selection. And these are you're going to be judged by your peers. Okay. So you have to look at this environment as a very litigious, law abiding system for the most part. Yeah, you got your rebels. Yeah, you got your people who rage against the machine. But for the most part, people are going to cover their ass first when it comes to obeying the law. And you need to know what the laws are. What's permissible, what's not permissible. Look at your state laws, you know, county laws. Look at everything as much as you can. You got Google, you got Chat GPT, you got Hyper Agent, you got Claude, you got Clause, you have all these different resources where just by the push of a button, you can get some understanding of the laws in your environment. This will help you make informed decisions when you're, putting yourself in certain situations or when you're making certain choices or decisions in relationships. It'll give you a more of an informed decision of what to do next when you have an understanding and you're informed of the law and just your history. So love yourself, have a core value system, understand your history behind your culture, your community, the laws in this country, the history of America. Really do your research. That's three. I would say, and you guys can add more rules in here. The fourth rule is you need to understand social relationships, social rules, social hierarchies, norms, morals, ethics. You need to understand the social environment as a young Black man more than really any other race in this world. You almost need to be a sociologist You need to study, study groups, study the history of certain groups and how they move and how they interact with you in your culture as a younger black man. Sometimes black guys want to get into this neo complex where you feel like you're so different, you're so special. What applies to them doesn't apply to you. No, it applies to you. And you need to understand the different values of different social groups. What's important to white people, right? White people have values and priorities and non-negotiables that don't apply to you. So you need to understand that. What's valuable to the Mexican community? What are their core values? The Indian community, the Native American community, the Irish community, whatever. You need to understand and study the value systems of different groups. And you can see that by their behaviors because all behavior follows value. So everything isn't going to be written in the textbooks. You need to understand this because this will also help inform your choices of friend groups. You don't need to be putting yourself in situations where you are the minority friend. It doesn't matter if you're around all black folks and maybe you're the only Christian or you're the only Buddhist or you're the only, you know, um, what is it? Um, Catholic, whatever, or you're the only black person out of a group of white dudes, or you're the only black person out of a group of Hispanic dudes, or you're the only black person out of a group, you're not going to reach your maximum potential in this life by surrounding yourself by any dominant group and you're the minority because no one group in this world has all the answers. All white people don't have all the answers for human existence. So surrounding yourself by a bunch of white folks doesn't guarantee that your potential is going to be maxed out because there's a lot of stuff white people don't know. Surrounding yourself around a lot of Mexicans and you're the only black folk don't mean that you're the black person. Doesn't necessarily mean, oh, I'm gonna reach my full maximum potential surround around all these Mexicans because they don't have all the answers, or even black folks. You need to, as much as you can, pick best out of every group. As long as you have a choice in the matter, you want to be in an environment that's you know as diverse in thought as possible. Even if you're around all black people, let it be a mixture of some people that are just like you too. Who think just like you too. Because sometimes you could be around all black folks, but just your belief system and your understanding and how you live your life may be insulated from other black people. So you might find yourself getting put in situations, and I've seen this a lot too, with dealing with all black folks, where you may not be the one that, engage in certain activities or do certain things, but if they do, you going down with them. So you need to really understand social interaction and social engagement. Don't put yourself around groups that are the majority of, values that don't align with what you align with. And you need to make sure if you're going to put yourself in any social group, even if it is diverse, that they care about your safety just as much as they care about yours. Because I understand with fellas sometimes where we just get lost in the moment. We're not really thinking clearly. We just want to have fun. We just want to get some booty. So a lot of times, every man for himself, right? That's one of the rules that really hurt our communities as men because we were narcissists when it comes to really taking care of each other as brothers. We're narcissists. America is really designed to benefit the individual. You don't really see a lot of group benefits even in the white community now. A lot of white folks thought they were going to benefit off other stuff that other white people do, but not, they're suffering. They're hurting for jobs. They're hurting for benefits and resources too. So, they like to give this illusion in America that, and some groups do have certain leverages, and leverage over other communities. I agree with that. There are a lot of laws and policies and things that are in place that do give them certain advantages. But when you go back down to like the fundamentals, if any of these same groups, depending on everything is like a very individuated case by case basis. That's why it's so hard to even speak to this shit because it's like it's hard to really generalize because everything is so case by case. Because I know some people will argue where you got white folks, they'll murder, they'll commit crimes, they'll do certain things, but they'll get a slap on their wrist. Yeah, you're absolutely right in some instances. And then other people may argue the same thing is for black folks, where they might do certain crimes and commit certain atrocities, and they get a slap on the wrist. So it's so individual where you don't want to use that information as fuel for you just to go out and do the wrong fucking thing. Don't let what you see fool you. Protect yourself. Sometimes people will pay attention to the environment and they'll say, "Oh, I see certain people doing this, so I'm gonna go do this," or "Oh, I'm seeing that people can get a pass with this, so I'm gonna get a pass with this," and you put yourself in a fucked up situation. Just do the best you can to protect yourself, make the right decision, and to keep yourself safe. Okay, because The reality is, as a younger black man, I gotta admit, you are at a disadvantage if a crime does happen and you're surrounded around a whole bunch of white people, and if they don't got your back and they say, well, he did it, it's your word against theirs. And in the social eyes, since to the perceived sort of like image of black people in this country, they look at us as being criminals and all these different things anyway, which is why it's so important to understand your history, understand the laws, understand, how you're viewed, because you might put yourself in a situation where you didn't do anything wrong, but it's your word against these white people word. So it's rolling dice. It's really rolling dice. And right now, there's a big divide and a war between the black and white community. You need to understand that. You need to accept that. Even though people are not saying it, they're trying to make it seem like everything is all good. Everything is not all good. There's a very spiritual, psychological warfare that's going on between the black and white community in the United States of America. And it's been going this way for centuries. So you need to be aware of what environment you putting yourself in, what space you're putting yourself in. You need to protect yourself. Don't pay attention to what everybody else is doing and you think you can do it too. That's the fourth rule. You need to understand, deconstruct, study socializing, social hierarchy, social rules, social norms, social history, social values among different groups. You need to make better informed decisions and choices around where you put yourself socially in this country. So that's about just four. I didn't get to really get into that many more because I don't have time. But hope you guys